Hello to everybody who is joining us, and welcome to Emory Climate Talks. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences at Emory University. Today, as we all know, is the 19th anniversary of the September 11th attacks, and Scatter Strike was this Tuesday and Wednesday. This week has been quite special for me because in one of the classes I teach, we had a chance to talk about racial justice for nearly an hour. I hope that this Emory Climate Talks will be one of those places where we can all be open and honest about the problems we face and discuss how we can best move forward to transform our society. Talking about racial justice, there will be a webinar by Dr. Ibram Kendi next Wednesday at 4 p.m. on his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, organized by Emory Center for Ethics in partnership with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Emory. I would highly encourage everyone to sign up if you have not done so already. Dr. Kendi writes in his book, quote, "Do nothing climate policy is racist policy, since the predominantly non-white global South is being victimized by climate change more than the wider global North, even as the wider global North is contributing more to its acceleration," end quote. Emory Climate Talks webinar series is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the United Nations climate change negotiations. And Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. Before I introduce our speakers today, I wanted to talk about some logistics and thank all the listeners again for all your support. As usual, this talk is being recorded and we have muted you all. Please use the chat function to address any questions you have to the speakers at any point. We will take them at the end after the talks are over. All the past talks are on the YouTube channel, and you can subscribe at youtube.com/c/Emory Climate Talks. I would like to thank Leah Thomas, as usual, for doing all the work behind the scenes. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter as well so that you will receive all the upcoming talk information directly to your mailbox. We have a movie screening coming up at the end of the month and a post-movie screening seminar on September 30th at 6 p.m. Please visit our website, climatetalks.emorydomains.org. And I would like to just share the screen so that you can see and take the QR code right now that you see here to register for the movie screening as well. We do have other 2 seminars lined up for October and November, and we are planning more to come. So, and another possibly movie screening as well. So I hope you will keep sending us your suggestions as well and join us in the conversation. Okay, let me get back to today's seminar speakers. Okay, so today I'm so excited that we have 2 speakers, Ms. Susan Rutherford and Ms. Amanda Medori Hallauer from the City of Atlanta Department of Watershed Management, DWM. What is so exciting is that the DWM received the first publicly issued environmental impact bond last February. I'm sure they will tell us more in detail, but it is so great to see that the city is pioneering the innovative green infrastructure projects to address flooding and water quality issues and to reduce stormwater runoff, which of course is important as we prepare for climate adaptation. The project also is personally exciting for me because this project specifically targets the West Side neighborhoods that my lab has been working on as well. Our first speaker, Ms. Susan Rutherford, is the Stormwater Program Director for the City of Atlanta DWM, overseeing regulatory compliance and capital improvement programs. With a background in watershed protection, Ms. Rutherford previously managed Atlanta's Greenway Acquisition Project to acquire nearly 2,000 acres of green space and led Atlanta's Green Infrastructure Program Development Team. Ms. Rutherford has a master's in city planning from Georgia Tech, and she's a certified professional in urban planning and a certified facility planner. Our second speaker, Ms. Amanda Medori Hallauer, is an environmental planner with the City of Atlanta DWM in the Office of Watershed Protection, where she is responsible for advancing plans, policies, and projects involving green infrastructure as part of DWM's Stormwater Management Program. In this role, Ms. Hallauer coordinated the use of innovative environmental impact bond financing to implement restoration and resilience projects on the city's west side. Prior to that, Ms. Hallauer spent 14 years as a project manager with D.R. Horn and Company based in Washington, D.C., developing long-term strategies for protection and sustainable use of ecologically and culturally important properties, neighborhoods, and watersheds. Ms. Hallauer has a Master of Environmental Management from Duke University's Nicholas School of the Environment and a BS from Tulane University. Thank you so much both for joining us, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, well, thanks so much for having us and for inviting us to speak. Again, I'm Susan Rutherford, and I think Amanda's going to share the presentation and we'll get started. The department, yeah,
right now, yes.
Great. And the Department of Watershed Management is primarily a drinking water and wastewater utility, and we are funded primarily by your water and sewer bills. So Amanda and I are both city planners, and with a city planning background and green space, natural resources background, and so we've both ended up in this very engineering and water utility kind of environment. And so we're excited to bring more of a natural resources background into that environment as we talk about stormwater. And as we manage a stormwater program and integrating green infrastructure into the program. So I'm going to talk more about the stormwater program overall, and then Amanda will talk about the environmental impact bond and the projects that she's managing under that program. There's a lot of focus on funding and money and compliance. Those are the big drivers of how the City of Atlanta manages stormwater. So going on to the next slide, we are again, primarily drinking water and wastewater utility. And so we're funded by your water and sewer bills that are paid monthly. We do not have a stormwater fee or a stormwater utility fee in the City of Atlanta. DeKalb County has one where Emory has been for a while, but the City of Atlanta does not have one. So our stormwater program is primarily driven by our regulatory requirements for being able to discharge our effluent, our treated effluent from our wastewater treatment plants into the Chattahoochee River and the South River. And so there's a lot of EPA and through the Clean Water Act, we have a lot of regulatory requirements around watershed protection for that drinking water effluent and for that wastewater effluent. And so those are the kinds of watershed protection things that that enable the city to have had a stormwater program up till now. And then I'll go over a few more funding sources that have enabled our program to develop even more the last couple of years. So next slide, stormwater runoff is everyone's problem. It's a huge resilience issue. It all comes from all of us. We're part of the problem. Our rooftops, our driveways, our walkways and sidewalks, the streets, and all of this is draining at some point into a creek or a river. And so these are the problems of stormwater runoff, and we're talking about both quality, so that what's in the water, and also the quantity, the volume of the water. Going on to the next slide, these are the types of problems that we have with stormwater runoff. So the water quality, flooding of our streets, the infrastructure is damaged. We have sewer overflows, especially in the combined portions of the city, and erosion, really bad stream bank erosion, which is common of urban creeks all over the country. This map on the right shows these are the stormwater complaints that we get in a typical year, and you can see they're spread all over the city. So this is an equal opportunity problem. Let's move it on to the next slide. I like for people to understand that we do have, even though we don't have this stormwater utility fee as a funding source, we have a lot of problems with fixing the pipes and maintaining the pipes that we have. But we do a lot with inspections and monitoring. We have stormwater compliance inspectors that go all over the city. They inspect industries to make sure that industries are not polluting and not allowing runoff from their sites get into this public storm system. We have we have erosion control inspectors that they evaluate active construction sites to make sure that the runoff is not exiting, that everyone's got their silt fence and their temporary construction ponds and all those measures so that we don't have silt eroding off into our streams. And then we have floodplain management. We make sure we have very strict ordinances in the city, probably stricter than anywhere else in the state, where we don't allow any development in the floodplain. And we've really had these rules in place since the 1970s. And then we have our capital improvements, both on the gray and the green side, which is what we'll continue to talk about here. Moving on, this, like I mentioned that we don't have the stormwater utility funding source, but we do have the, about 4 years ago, the City Council authorized the use of the municipal option sales tax to, you can move on to the next slide, Amanda.
Sorry, I wasn't sure what it was showing. Okay,
yes,
here we go.
Yeah. The municipal option sales tax to help fund stormwater projects. This is a sales tax that most of it goes to pay for drinking water and wastewater services, and it's allowed the city to do a lot of the work to comply with our wastewater consent decree, where we're under, everyone knows about the history of Atlanta, where we have had these big lawsuits by the EPA, EPD, and the Chattahoochee Riverkeeper back in the late 90s for our combined sewer overflows and our violations of the Clean Water Act. And so the municipal option sales tax has been around for about 20 years, and it's a 1 penny sales tax in the city of Atlanta, and most of that revenue goes to help fund our wastewater improvements to help us comply with the consent decrees that came out of those lawsuits. But now 10% of those revenues can be used just for stormwater. And that has been really a game changer for us to be able to do some projects and fix some pipes, and even to get a good asset inventory of all of our stormwater assets, put that in GIS so we know what we own. So yeah, moving on, we can, so we're able to get, respond to some of those in that red dot map that you saw earlier. This most money allows us to respond to those complaints and kind of identify projects and clean the pipes in those areas and identify repairs that need to happen, or if we need to reroute the storm pipes around a block and that kind of thing. We can now do that. So another thing the most is going to enable us to do is to do more green infrastructure. On the next slide, with we have a green infrastructure strategic action plan that we developed with a whole series of partners back in 2017. It was the American Rivers, the Conservation Fund, West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, a lot of local organizations. And so green infrastructure is a way to manage stormwater by replicating the way that Mother Nature would manage stormwater, right? So we've covered the city with driveways and pavement, but so we have to do some special design for green infrastructure to be able to try to infiltrate the stormwater and manage and clean it with plants and soils, and we have special plants and special soils that are involved in the green infrastructure. And then another way that we manage stormwater through green infrastructure is with rainwater harvesting. So, and these are our equity principles of the kind of things the climate change people are well aware of, is the economic, social, and environmental benefits. And so these are some of the examples that we're talking about with green infrastructure, with the bioswales and the rain gardens. We have a constructed wetland down in southeast Atlanta that we built with the Army Corps of Engineers a few years ago that's now designated as a wildlife Audubon sanctuary. And then stream bank restoration also kind of comes into play there as well with some of our green infrastructure projects. Moving on, as far as implementation of the green infrastructure, like I said, we haven't had the stormwater utility fee, but we've been able to implement some of our green infrastructure in the combined sewer area. And the combined sewer area is just in that, I don't think we have that a map of that, but it's about 10% of the land area of the city, and it's basically all around downtown. And it kind of is encompassed within the Atlanta Beltline. If you think about the geography of the city and the Atlanta Beltline being kind of on a ridge line around as a railroad line, right? It's kind of on a ridge, and it's the flat place. And so the middle of Atlanta is kind of on the hilltop in the middle of the city, and all of the watersheds kind of flow out from there. And so the middle of the city was where they piped all the creeks. They piped them over and turned them into sewers. So that's a very rough and crude explanation of the combined sewer system, but it's where all of the drainage, so the stormwater runoff goes into these piped creeks, and those are the sewer lines. So they get wastewater, and all the wastewater and stormwater in those pipes goes out, and it gets ultimately treated at the wastewater treatment plants before it goes into the river. But that is the combined sewer area in the middle of the city, where you have both stormwater and sewage in these pipes. And then the 90% of the city is actually separated. And so that's where the sewage is in one pipe, the stormwater is in a separate pipe. And the stormwater in 90% of the city just goes directly into the creeks. It doesn't get treated at all. So anyway, in the combined sewer area, we consider this is like a wastewater. This is a place where our wastewater funds can actually apply. So we don't have to use our most funds as much in the combined sewer area. So we have things like historic Fourth Ward pond, so a 9 million gallon pond that's right there that has really helped with the flooding that used to flood Ponce City Market. We have a green street going in on Boone Boulevard. It's divides the Vine City and English Avenue neighborhoods in the Proctor Creek Basin. We have this Rodney Cook Senior Park going in, and that's another 10 million gallon pond, kind of similar to historic Fourth Ward, where we're capturing lots of stormwater in this pond before it goes into, we're keeping it out of the combined sewer system. So we call it capacity relief. So we're relieving the combined sewer system of that capacity. And then permeable pavers, these are in Peoplestown in Southeast Atlanta, Peoplestown and Mechanicsville. So these are our green infrastructure projects in the combined sewer area. And moving on to the next area, the most, that municipal option sales tax money, I'm spending more and more of my time not on the green projects, which I love, but on the gray projects where we're trying to fix broken storm pipes and curbs and inlets in the streets, and dealing with complaints with street flooding. And that is, but we're trying more and more to integrate green infrastructure into those funds that are being, into the solutions to these problems and complaints, and those are funded by the municipal option sales tax funds. The next one is going to be, the next way that we're implementing green infrastructure is the post-development stormwater ordinance. And this is where most of the green infrastructure that we've been able to install is not installed by the city, it's installed by developers. And that's because we have an ordinance that requires them to use green infrastructure to manage the first inch of runoff on their site. And that's for both the volume management and the water quality management. And so we're having green infrastructure all over the city as a result of that. And going on to the next, so we've had the amount of runoff that's being managed by the private sector, by development, is way more than what we're able to pay for and manage with public projects. And so those are the numbers you can see there. We've had quite a lot of, this is a pretty big amount of volume in terms of the runoff. And we have this goal of 225 million gallons a year. But yeah, you can keep moving. I'm glad Ari talked about equity at the beginning of this, and that's a major theme with the climate talks. For us, that kind of plays out here. So development in the city of Atlanta occurs in certain areas more than others. And so if we're depending on the private sector to do most of our green infrastructure development, then that's mostly going to go to the north side. So this is what the green infrastructure map looks like. And so we have been with some of these, the other public projects that we're funding, and the ones that we're able to get grants for, and other funding sources for, we're tending to focus those funds more in other areas of the city that aren't getting all this development. So moving on, the kind of the fourth area of funding that we have are these grants and innovative financing opportunities. And so for grant projects, we have things like the we have the EPA 319 grants, and we're doing some projects like we've got one now with the Blue Heron Nature Preserve, which is not in an equity area, but they're a really great partner, and they had a really innovative project that we're doing up there involving beaver dams. But we paid for that Boone Boulevard, Green Street that you see here on the right with the EPA 319 grants, and we're also doing some work. We just started a project down in Southwest Atlanta where we're getting some public involvement going with adding green infrastructure to the streets in the Westview neighborhood. We've had with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we're doing this constructed wetland, and they also did a study along Proctor Creek that's going to result in some stream restoration projects. Some of our partners, we partner with other organizations that do grants, and so the Urban Waters 5-star grant, and then we also get some FEMA funds occasionally to do some home buyouts. And then the biggest one of these right now is our environmental impact bond, and Amanda Hallauer will tell you more about that. She's the project manager.
All right, I'm going to turn my video back on. Hopefully it won't cause any issues. Great, so yes, I'm going to talk specifically about our environmental impact bond, a little bit about the bond itself and how it works, and then hopefully, and then about the projects that it's funding. So as Susan was talking about, lacking funding through our traditional channels for some of to address needs in some of the underserved areas of the city and implement some of these really impactful green infrastructure programs, resilience projects. We found a tool, so that was in the form of innovative outcomes-based financing, known as an environmental impact bond, or EIB, which provided a vehicle for us to reprioritize, to finance, and to deploy these projects that will really deliver multiple benefits and relief to areas of high need in the city, and by targeting through this bond impact investors. And so you see in this picture here, our mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, is announcing that the Department of Watershed Management was awarded grant funding to pioneer the first in the nation publicly offered EIB. Right. And so what is an EIB? It is an innovative financing tool that uses a pay-for-success approach to align. Basically, it aligns public spending with the outcomes that the issuers, like the city, care about from projects, rather than just for the projects, just for constructing the projects alone. It's a form of debt, similar to a traditional bond, traditional municipal bond, except the difference is that part of the payment, the repayment to the investors, is determined by how successfully the projects achieve a predefined environmental or social outcome. And this diagram shows how it works. The investors will provide upfront, find the capital to the issuer, the public entity, the city, to construct projects. And then an independent third-party evaluator measures and validates the outcome and the performance of those projects, and whether or not that outcome meets a predetermined threshold, or then that determines how much investors are paid. Another important element that's central to this model is that it assigns an economic value to all of the project benefits, and it sort of prices these benefits into the performance-based financial structure. So in this way, it's a model that's particularly well suited to those projects such as green infrastructure that do provide multiple co-benefits to communities. All right, so our Atlanta DWM's Environmental Impact Bond for green infrastructure is financing 6 green infrastructure projects in the Proctor Creek watershed on the west side. The EIB came about through the city's partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation and the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative. They launched a nationwide competition to select a city to pioneer and basically test EIBs in the public municipal bond market. So our proposal was selected, and the Rockefeller grant funded the services of 2 firms, Quantified Ventures and Neighborly, who helped us to structure, set up, to market, and to issue the bonds. And then investors provided $13.5 million through these bonds to finance projects, and they're green infrastructure projects that are designed to capture and reduce stormwater runoff, while also providing these additional benefits that will improve public health, resilience, and quality of life. In order to measure the performance of the projects, we had to come up with an outcome metric. So we're using the cumulative volumetric capacity of all of 6 of the projects to capture stormwater runoff as our outcome metric. So what's the capacity to capture and temporarily store and filter stormwater runoff? And so together the projects are expected to provide 6.4 million gallons of stormwater storage capacity in a typical storm event, which translates to reducing annual runoff by at least 56 million gallons. All right, the Proctor Creek watershed, as I mentioned, we selected a high priority area of the city for these EIB funded projects on the west side. It's the only watershed that is entirely within the city boundary. Runs basically from downtown to the Chattahoochee, and it connects 35 neighborhoods that have high historic significance. This is the birthplace of the civil rights, largely African-American populations. And however, they are just, these neighborhoods in the upper Proctor Creek watershed are located just downstream of downtown, the highly built up downtown area. So they have faced disproportionate impacts of stormwater runoff, of flooding, pollution, and associated challenges, environmental, public health, economic challenges. It's environmental justice hotspot. As these neighborhoods also face high unemployment. I can't get back to my last slide. And vacancies, there's brownfields, and sort of a lack of green space. So all of these issues we're trying to address. What slide do you see right now? Is it EIB projects and goals?
Yes.
Yes, EIB projects and goals.
All right, so anyway, the city has identified a huge need for investment in the Proctor Creek watershed. So the types of, and investment in sort of the ecosystem restoration and watershed improvement projects needed to address the many challenges. And so the types of projects that were funding here with our EIB revenues include sort of a variety of green infrastructure, bioretention along streetscapes and in city parks, stream and floodplain restoration, constructed wetlands, several of the types of projects Susan mentioned. Primary goals are to address local flooding and water quality issues in our streams and waterways by reducing the impact of stormwater runoff, both in combined sewer systems and in our creeks, while creating many additional benefits. Providing new green space, open space for neighborhoods, restoring habitat, providing environmental education and recreation, improving public health, also creating jobs and workforce development opportunities, and beautifying neighborhoods. Let's see, is this advancing?
No, it's not.
Okay, I seem to have some sort of, there we go. Okay, whew, there we go. All right, so the benefits that I just talked about. As I explained earlier, the unique aspect of the EIB is that it actually factors in the economic value of all of those additional benefits into the sort of financial model, the bond terms. So we worked with our advisors at Quantified Ventures to select several benefits that we could essentially monetize and assign values to these. And these values are also tied to the volume of stormwater captured, our outcome metric. So we modeled how it changes as the performance, as the outcome changes. And so we looked at flood risk reduction, water quality improvement, job creation, and then air quality improvement and heat island reduction tied to public health impacts. And so they were calculated both based on actual cost savings of the apartment, treatment, avoided treatment, et cetera, as well as revenues that would accrue to the city through things like property taxes and decreased social services needs, et cetera. So we did determine that or calculate a total $19 million benefit to the city, economic benefit or value to the city at the based on sort of the as designed volume of these projects. But that said, this is really a conservative number in analysis, since there are quite a few intangible outcomes that we just couldn't monetize that will also be provided. So, but that is a good return on investment nonetheless. And this just shows, basically, so since this economic value is tied to and depends on the ability of the green infrastructure to capture stormwater, the value increases with project performance that that we measure. And so the additional economic value generated between our expected volume, where we think we're going to come, and then that high performance threshold that we set actually exceeds the additional amount that we will be paying our investors back if we exceed that. That's called the performance payment. So it means that the city is sharing a portion of that additional value with the investors to sort of reward them for taking on the risk. But we're still receiving a net positive benefit, and it's basically a win-win for the issuers and the investors. That's the idea. And this is how it looks. The way it works here, you can see in this graph, is that there's a base case. So if our projects come anywhere up to 6.52 million gallons, that's our high performance threshold, we're still paying back the bond, but at a below market rate. So we're actually getting a better rate than we would, which the investors take on a little bit lower return in exchange for the possibility that about 25% plus, a little more than 25% chance that we will exceed this high performance threshold. And at that point, the city would pay out a performance payment of $1 million pro rata, and to basically share a portion of those benefits. We found several advantages to using this mechanism. It provided access to this new source of investment capital, this sector of investors that are impact investors that are interested in getting a financial return, but also seeing positive environmental outcomes. And so that's a new source of private money. We were able to gave us an opportunity to prioritize some of the impactful projects that don't always get the limited funding. And it's this shared success model. So we're aligning incentives, and that makes for a nice story. And additionally, we're able to test innovation and manage risks. So we can basically, you know, deploy kind of at scale these new green infrastructure projects. We can sort of test them, we can evaluate their performance, and that'll inform future planning and hopefully provide opportunities for future funding. And it makes public spending more efficient. Our timeline, we were awarded this opportunity and announced early 2018. It took us about a year to put this all together. We had to structure the bonds, or set it up, and that involved lots of coordination among different groups of people. The project design and engineering was tied to the financial terms. Since we were projecting, you know, outcomes of these projects. So that was really interesting. So, you know, the engineering and project teams were working with our financial people and the lawyers, and we all sort of had to coordinate. So lots of lessons learned. And then at the same time, we had to go through, you know, all the city approval processes, get our council to approve the bond ordinance, et cetera. And then it was necessary that there was a need to market this, and Neighborly helped with that. This being a new type of bond in the municipal bond market required just, you know, some education and outreach to the potential investors to explain what this was. I could have used even more time, to be quite honest. And there were some interested investors who even said, you know, I like it, but I kind of want to wait and see one, see a successful one. And that's part of what it means to be, you know, to pioneer and be new. So hopefully we'll be that. But nonetheless, we closed in early 2019. We sold all of the bonds. They received favorable ratings, bond ratings, and were sold out to a mix of investors, impact and sort of institutional investors who wanted to diversify. So we have the funds, and we're starting the timeline of you know, completing the design and bid packages so that we can procure construction contracts, construct the projects, and then as each of the 6 is completed, they'll sort of overlap in time. They will be evaluated by that third party sort of validator, and who will issue a report on the outcome, the volume. And we have 5 years really into year 6 to complete that process, because in 2024 is when the performance payment is due, if due, if we exceed the threshold, and then we will still pay the bond back, you know, the regular at the regular rate over a 10-year period. So there's a couple other advantages that have come out of this EIB, this unique financing mechanism that we as a department have been able to leverage to further some of our goals, including some of our equity goals that we talked about. We're part of a water equity task force with we're the lead utility here in Atlanta, with many local partners working to make sure that our investments in water infrastructure have equitable outcomes. So we, you know, so that with this impact-oriented financing driving these projects, we're trying to maximize the benefits of the EIB funded projects to the communities that they are in through both the design process as well as the implementation of them. So in collaboration with our many partners and local stakeholders, we're piloting it. We sort of used it to pilot a couple of initiatives, the increasing authentic public engagement. So we have had over 25 community meetings on the EIB. We're engaging in collaborative community-based planning for the future use of, to plan for the future use of some of these new green spaces. So we've been trying to, you know, sort of improve that outreach process for these projects, since they're visible, they're in neighborhoods, you know, they're really impacting people day to day, and we want, and so residents need to have a voice. And then we're also we've committed to ensuring that the projects generate meaningful workforce development benefits in the form of training, capacity building, and employment in these sort of green jobs. And this is specifically benefits for residents of the neighborhoods where the projects will be located. So we're working in partnership with Workforce Atlanta, that's the city's workforce development agency, and as well as local training organizations to try and incorporate workforce opportunities into the construction as well as the long-term maintenance of the projects. So if I have a little more time, I wanted to go through, this is the fun part. This is the actual projects that the EIB is funding. These are our 6 projects just listed in a table here. So first we have 2 projects in city parks, as I mentioned. So I go through, I have a series of kind of renderings and photos to illustrate. Moseley Park is one of them, and this is Moseley Park neighborhood is there on the west side, and we so the idea with these park projects is to integrate bioretention, enhance bioswales, bioretention gardens, and buffers into the park landscapes to collect, stormwater, drainage, and reduce flooding, improve water quality, filter the water before it gets into the creeks, as well as to enhance the aesthetics of the park. So to, aesthetically integrate these features into the areas of the park. So this is Moseley Park. This is it's also in Grove Park, which is that neighborhood, and that park is actually just near the new the West Side Park by the quarry. So you can see some of the same type of features that will be integrated in some of into the areas of the park, that are underused, that aren't used for recreation. And it also provides opportunity for, education through signage and that sort of thing. And here's an example of a bioretention feature that we installed in Selena Butler Park to kind of show, how we can integrate these into some of those areas. All right, so then we have the English Avenue neighborhood Green Streets project, or Green Infrastructure Street Improvements. English Avenue, just west of Mercedes-Benz Stadium, is a floodplain neighborhood, lots of localized street flooding and that sort of thing. So here we'll be installing stormwater planter bump outs along the right-of-ways of several blocks throughout and this collects runoff from the streets to capture it, increase or relieve capacity of the combined sewer here to reduce overflows. And in addition to reducing flooding, it provides streetscape beautification with the vegetation, traffic calming, and those sorts of benefits as well. And here's, just a couple examples of, this is in Southeast Atlanta, a stormwater planter bump out and what that looks like. And this is actually a picture from Philadelphia. Okay, so those were some of our sort of BMP bioretention-based projects. We then have a few large ecosystem restoration type stormwater projects that we're funding. One of them we call the Greens Ferry. It's called the Greens Ferry site because it's just downstream of our closed Greens Ferry combined sewer facility. That area has actually been separated now, but it's still it's just downstream of where lots of stormwater from a combined area upstream is routed, and so there's very, very, very high flows that go through this site. It's a low-lying area, and we will be restoring the stream channel there, reconnecting it with the floodplain, and as well as restoring the habitat, restoring native habitat on the site. And so you can see existing conditions. There's actually a large concrete channel that currently, that the stream is channelized. So it goes, the idea was to just send that water straight through, but it obviously leads to lots of flooding in large storm events and erosion. And as you can see here too, there's lots of invasive species, overgrowing the site. So we want it to look something like this. This is showing a post-restoration stream, the McDaniel Branch, in a more natural state. So what we're going to do there, this shows a rendering, a plan view rendering, is to take that channel. So right now, the water is sent straight through that concrete channel. But we will be restoring natural stream patterns with the meanders, with stone and wood features that will slow and dissipate the water velocity and create little pools and riffles for aquatic habitat, restoring riparian and upland native species, removing invasive species, and also providing public access amenities. So the trail network, this is going to be a public open space. It's a 9-acre site. It will be the first basically park in the Hunter Hills neighborhood, which residents are excited about. It'll be sort of a natural area, you know, nature preserve type park. So, you know, not intensive use, but we are working with the Conservation Fund, who helped us acquire this site, this floodplain area, which clearly is undevelopable site here, to work with the community to envision amenities and ways that this site could be improved to incorporate things like, you know, art and cultural installations, natural play areas, seating, use it for, you know, maybe markets and things like that. So that's an ongoing process. We have another stream restoration project called the Mosquito Hole tributary. It's also just downstream of our North Avenue combined sewer, so receives those types of high flows leading to erosion. Lots of, you know, it's a very degraded stretch of stream. So we'll be stabilizing banks, you know, restoring native vegetation, as well as improving. There's a stagnant water issue that creates a public health, has created a public health issue, which has given it its name, Mosquito Hole. So you can see that illustrated here. And then finally, we have a project at a site we call Valley of the Hawks. It was actually named that during a process to, this was a community-based planning process several years back, called the Proctor North Avenue Green Infrastructure Vision, that was led by some of the local environmental organizations and community leaders, and to identify opportunities for green infrastructure in this upper Proctor Creek area. And this was one of the projects identified. So we're finally being able to bring this to fruition, again, through a partnership with the Conservation Fund and others. And so the site is a low-lying area. It is actually just upstream of the North Avenue Combined Sewer Overflow Facility, which means it's in the combined sewer area. And it is also just east of the future West Side Beltline, so basically adjacent to that. It is in the sort of Bankhead neighborhood, and you can see the picture on the right is looking over the site from that Beltline corridor, elevated corridor. It's a valley, and it's overgrown with invasive species. It's low-lying. It's a perfect area for natural stormwater management. And so we're creating this series of stormwater ponds and constructed wetlands that will collect the stormwater runoff from the surrounding neighborhood. It will relieve the capacity. Let me go to the next slide, which shows, again, a plan view rendering of these Ponzo wetlands. And so it will relieve capacity of the combined sewer area here by basically diverting a whole bunch of runoff from into the Ponzo Wetlands, which will be filtered, stored, filtered, cleaned, and then released into that Mosquito Hole tributary, instead of into our combined, into the big trunk line with the combined sewer. And so that will reduce those overflows, sewer overflows that happen, and the localized flooding. And this is also going to create a new natural area in this historic Weston Heights Bankhead neighborhood. We'll have a walking path around it, and eventual Beltline access. And then again, we're going to be working with our partners, many of our partners, and a neighborhood association, et cetera, to come up with a vision of how this could be potentially improved for community use. This isn't part of the EIB funded project, but will be a partnership moving forward to, do things like, and create boardwalks and outdoor classrooms and signage, et cetera, and other amenities for the neighborhood. And then here are just some pictures. This is, again, the McDaniel Branch Wetlands in South Atlanta that are right in the middle of a neighborhood. And sort of precedent photo of these, you know, we're gonna have some terraces along the wetland, shows how people can, you know, will be able to walk through and really access and enjoy this nice native habitat right in the middle of the city. All right, so I hope I didn't go too long with that, but if we have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Great, thank you so much. On behalf of everybody that's attending, I would like to give a round of applause. There are so many questions. If we can just dive into them, that would be great. So I've tried to make the questions into some sets of questions that were similar. So the first question, well, the logistical question is that if you would be willing to share the PowerPoint presentation in the PDF format to the people that are attending.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
Great.
we can just send that to you, right?
Okay. And
Yep,
so we
no
will
problem.
have the recorded presentation available on the YouTube channel. And so you're more than welcome to go back to the YouTube channel and watch. Okay, so the first set of questions, are there any issues regarding reporting of stormwater issues? Do most stormwater issues get reported about? And would you still inspect places that don't get reported to make sure everything is running smoothly? Is there any pollution tracking monitoring of the untreated stormwater that is discharged and its impact on aquatic life?
So we do have, so if you see us, if you have a stormwater or flooding issue, call 311. 546-0311 is the city's intake for issues. We have a direct line to them for responding to, especially to some emergency flooding stuff. And also if you see discoloration in the creek, it's important to we have a team that can go out and look at that immediately and try to track where the pollution is coming from, if people are dumping paint into the creek or that kind of thing. So, so yes, we respond to people turning in issues, but we do have, we have USGS water quality samplers at various points around the city that you can access on the USGS website. We have a human beings who are out sampling the streams, and we send those samples to our water lab and have them analyze, and then report them to EPD. And we have a stream team that actually is required to walk every stream in the city. We have 45 miles of streams in the city, and they walk 100% of those every 5 years. And so we're always out in the streams, and we have people that do drive around during rainstorms and call in issues. So it's a combination, but we do depend a lot on the public to report things. So.
Great. So I know that Amanda has to leave earlier, so I will ask the questions related to her first, maybe. So Amanda, you mentioned about engaging the community, but there was a question to what extent the local community engagement during the planning and development processes of these green infrastructure projects, and if you could illustrate some of the ways that you have promoted community participation that were successful.
So we have in each project, they're each kind of in a different neighborhood. So, you know, we worked with those neighborhood associations to, you know, attend the neighborhood association meetings to discuss the project, you know, show the concepts, and, you know, presented a series of them back and forth in the English Avenue neighborhood in particular. We've presented at several meetings. We met with some committees that they put together to provide feedback on the designs, and that's sort of been an iterative process of making changes as we've gone along. You know, working with the neighborhood association. So, and the same with, you know, Grove Park neighborhood association, and as well as Hunter Hills, a newly formed neighborhood association. And Weston Heights. So we, as I mentioned, the Greens Ferry and Valley of the Hawks projects, which are the two that are going to be creating new green spaces, we have we sort of in the planning stages of engaging in this visioning, this community visioning process in partnership with the Conservation Fund, the Proctor Creek Stewardship Council, and the local neighborhoods to determine what this public space will be for the communities surrounding it. Obviously, we've had a little bit of a pause with the with COVID as far as public engagement, but those are still, there's plenty of time because we we'll have to do the actual stream restorations first, and then we can have that phase two to add the community amenities. So that's, I think, sort of in a nutshell. And we've had some larger public meetings and open houses where we have set up invited the public at large, particularly we out in the Proctor Creek area, to come and ask questions, provide a presentation, and then just some opportunities to interact and talk about the program and the projects.
Great. So are third-party evaluators for the EIB system generally fair in their decisions of where to place EIB-funded projects? Has there been any bias in favor of wealthier parts of the city or residential rain garden installation part of the EIB?
I'm sorry, that was rain. Can you repeat that really quickly?
The last question, are residential rain garden installation part of the EIB?
Okay, yes, no, I'm sorry, no, they are not. These are large projects on public land that the city already owns or is acquiring. So it's not, this is not funding any private projects.
And also to the question about the Rockefeller Foundation started this whole EIB program, and they came to us and they identified Proctor Creek as the area that they wanted us to work in. So I mean that was the proposal from the very beginning. It's just everything in Proctor Creek.
Okay, great. And then there's a question, if you could explain a little bit more about how a monetized value was assigned for the improvement in water quality.
It's sort of based on the literature, a combination of our actual treatment costs, particularly in the combined sewer areas, sediment removal, as well as the water quality, the impacts of pollutants that, so the treatment of those pollutants. So it's a combination of sort of actual cost savings and then projected sort of theoretical numbers.
And can you divert some funds to providing rain barrels for Atlanta citizens so they can collect and use this water instead? Are there ways that people can implement simplified green infrastructure in their own lives to alleviate this issue? Do concerns for funding distract from the main goal of the project?
Well, so EIB specifically, we have identified, we'll just go to these 6 projects. We have the budget. That's how much money we have. We've identified them to the investors. So that's, we can't use these funds for anything else than those 6 projects. For this, since we don't have a stormwater fee, we don't have as many of those sorts of incentives for private residences right now, but we are working on trying to, do more of that. And Susan can answer more. There is a program right now called the Georgia Conservation Assistance Program that's accepting applications for Fulton County and Cobb County homeowners to, and I can send you I could certainly get the website. There was a webinar yesterday, but it's open to any homeowner who is interested in having green infrastructure, rain gardens, a few different types of practices installed on their home in their yards if they have flooding and drainage issues. So this is a grant fund that is going to fund completely, so it would be free. So I would encourage anyone to look at that, and hopefully if this program is successful, there will be more of those opportunities upcoming. I don't know if Susan wanted to add anything.
Yeah, and that's out of the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and one of our team members is on that commission, and he helped to create that program. So it's not a city program, but
Right.
but he helped create that program, and they got outside grant funding to fund that. But for rain barrels, the city does subsidize a rain barrel workshop program, and we're unfortunately not having it during COVID, but it's very popular, and people, we advertise it all the time in our water bill, utility bills, and social media and stuff. But it's it's voluntary. People can show up. I think it's like $40, and you walk away with a rain barrel. They teach you how to connect it to your gutters and that kind of thing.
That's great. Yeah, so Amanda, if you have to go, we understand. Thank you so much. But there are so many more questions. So if you can answer some of them, Susan, that would be great. But how close is the Department of Water Management to overhauling and developing a new sewer system? How many instances of sewage overflow have been observed over the past year in combined sewage systems? What areas in the city do you, I think you've already answered this actually, sorry. Yeah. Do you usually see this happening? And I think you were writing that in the chat. Yeah. Is there any obvious increase in the intensity of the impact of stormwater to Atlanta?
So we are under this consent decree to, and it's the primary metrics of the consent decree are improvements in water quality and reducing sewer spills. So we're not really necessarily building a brand new sewer system for the whole city. It's more about a combination of factors to meet the water quality goals. So it is renovating a lot of our facilities and our pipes, but also our practices and maintenance practices, and those kind of things are ongoing. So we've complied with the combined sewer overflow consent decree back in 2008. We built these giant tunnels underground, but we're having to continuously still build capacity in the combined sewer area in order to continue to meet those goals of the consent decree. So, we did all those combined sewer tunnels, and then we're about 3/4 of the way towards meeting the separate sewer consent decree. So we have a separate consent decree for the outside of the combined area, and we're addressing the rehab of those sewer pipes in phases. And so that's due in 2027 is our deadline to complete the work that we said we would do there. So that's how that's working. And then, yeah, this summer has been kind of nuts for rainstorms and high intensity rainstorms. And we had a bad overflow in Peoplestown where we already have been working that, we've added these permeable pavers. We added a 5 million gallon vault underneath the media lot vault underneath the media parking lot at the Braves Stadium, now the Georgia State Stadium. We had done a lot of work in Peoplestown that really had resulted in no sewer overflows since we've put in that media lot vault and those permeable pavers on 4 miles of streets. And so just 5 years later, just this year, we got this huge rainstorm, 2 or 3 inches in an hour, kind of major event where it's all very concentrated. And I think that's the climate change, those are the measurable things. We haven't had time to analyze the rainstorms this year, but I do know that we're at 70 inches for the year. And Atlanta's generally has an average of 54 inches of rain for the whole year. So anyway, we're not the weather people. We're just trying to respond to it. But I do think that's generally what we're operating under is storms are more frequent and more intense. And sewer spills are something we respond to. They're super important to us. We respond to them right away. It's a big deal. Sewer spills, if there's a fish kill, those are things that it's a big deal for us, and we respond to those right away. So anytime you see anything in a creek that doesn't look like it should be there, then call it in.
Okay, so I'll just ask a couple more questions. That's okay.
Yeah.
If you had to start from scratch, hypothetically, how would you design the sewage system and the water drainage system in the city? Is there a case where both of these systems were well planned in advance?
I mean, I think that the ways that they're planned out are in newer cities that are built from greenfields in the suburbs. You know, that's where you have newer systems where the combined sewer system model is something that all the old cities around the country have these same consent decrees for their combined sewer overflows that Atlanta has had. And so that's not the ideal way to build a city, but but you have if you're looking at it from a holistic city planning view, those cities also are super dense and they use less land per housing unit. And so there's a lot of other advantages to developing densely like that. But, you know, if you're gonna start from scratch, then you're looking at greenfield development in a suburban environment where everything's brand new. Another thing about Atlanta is really only about 35% of all the sewer infrastructure in the city is public. Think about that. Everything's built by developers. So all the sewer infrastructure, you know, even in these older neighborhoods like Virginia Highlands and stuff, that was built by developers. And then it was dedicated to the public. So we have standards that we required them to develop to, but all the sewer system was developed by developers as they built these new parts of the city.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge you face in terms of the distribution of green infrastructure? So within the next 5 to 10 years, what progress do you think the city of Atlanta will have made on green infrastructure? And what factors do you think will most significantly impact this progress? What potential does the city see in the global efforts to shift into a circular economy?
For green infrastructure, I mean, right now, the part of the, just right now, I've been in this role of the stormwater director since last October. And one of the things I've been trying to do is, one of my jobs is to address complaints. And so people complain when their street is flooded and their driveway is flooded and their yard and their basement is flooded because of stormwater coming off the street. And we may be able to address some of that with green infrastructure, but this is the biggest challenge for us right now is helping people stop suffering. I mean, people now have you know, PTSD every time it rains. And so and a lot of those, unfortunately, are gray infrastructure solutions. At the same time, we're trying to develop the green infrastructure because we feel like that's a more holistic way to try to have all the sites retain their stormwater on site instead of letting it flow into the public right-of-way. So these are happening at the same time, but the huge issue is developing the capacity to address we can't fix everything with green infrastructure. We've got to have a lot of gray infrastructure. And so to me, the biggest challenge is addressing that backlog of years and years of neglect and no maintenance and no money for to upgrade and maintain the storm sewer system. And then while at the same time developing this green infrastructure program. So that's kind of the big challenge and how we're kind of looking at it and how we're trying to address it.
Yeah, that's great. I think a lot of people had a lot of questions, and I'm so sorry I couldn't address everything. But the last question, if I could, there is a question about if there's any opportunity to leverage any of these project sites as a case study for research or teaching with undergraduate or graduate students at Emory or elsewhere. Is there such an opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have worked a lot with Georgia Tech on some things. We participate in some of their design studio, have invited us to come and sit in. And so we're happy to have people study our stuff. And there was a group that came up with civil engineering group that came up with some concepts for a kind of a wetland stream restoration area on United Avenue in Southeast Atlanta last semester. So yeah, we work with, there's a woman from Georgia State who studies beavers and beaver dams and water quality. And so yeah, we'd love to work with folks. And I know Emory works a lot with the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, especially the School of Public Health. So we appreciate, we're happy to work with folks.
That's great. So hopefully we can continue the discussion.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time and explaining about what the city is doing. This is very exciting. And yeah, sorry that I couldn't raise all the questions, but thanks for all the great questions as well, everybody. And yes, I hope you stay safe and healthy, and we will meet again soon at the end of the month. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ari.
Thank you so much, Susan.